Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz from Breaking Israel News. Um, I was out bike riding this morning, and a huge blessing. And I came to an interesting realization, connecting several things that have been bothering me. I'm very bothered about the uh, the impeachment hearings against Donald Trump, which is just a continuation of the ongoing troubles he's been having, which I feel are largely unjustified. And also at the same time, Israel has its own election woes. We're now at the point where Benny Gantz from the left wing has been tasked with forming a coalition. And you would think that the American democracy, which is so different than the Israeli democracy, you would think that there's no common denominator, but I actually think I came to the common denominator. And I'd like to explain it this way. Um, I realized a while back when the first Israeli election failed, the Israeli democratic system was devised by people who were left wing Eastern European socialists or European socialists, and excuse me, they pardon me for it's early in the morning and I'm being challenged by my physicality. They believed in socialism, in the group, versus the power of the individual. The U.S., on the other hand, believes very strongly in the power of the individual, which is why they have a president, whereas Israel has actually the head of a coalition. And I think the truth, the emet, is that you need both. You need a balance of both. And what's happened is the Israeli coalition system is set up so that it's not even, you don't even vote for an individual. We never voted for Netanyahu. That was actually tried once when he was elected, and he was elected. And that's not Israeli. The Israeli system is voting for a party. The party is the main thing. And in America, that's represented by the Democrats. And they're becoming even more so these days with a strong uprising of social democrats or social democratic socialists who believe more in the power of the group than of the individual. They are into social justice. Social justice is actually an oxymoron. Justice is meant for the individual. You judge his actions. So if you have a social justice, you're judging the individual by the actions of the group. That is an injustice. And that's the lie that's inherent in social justice warriors, that they are fighting for injustice. And in Israel, you vote for the coalition, but ultimately you need an individual. In Israel, that's the president, but the president was made into really a puppet figure by the framework established by the founders of Israel, Ben-Gurion and all those socialists, because they didn't want the individual to have power. Only Ben-Gurion, who refused to let go of the power, and actually, to be honest, that's one of the reasons why Netanyahu, I like him, I don't love him, but he also has utilized the power of the individual to weld together coalitions, which is really how government works. The government is the individual bringing together the group. The king is the embodiment of the entire nation. So here we have a problem in Israel where the individual has been so canceled out by the framework that the group cannot come together. In America, you have the group trying to overpower the individual, huge individuals. Donald Trump is a huge individual. He very much believes in the power of the individual. So the group hates him, not because of any of his policies. Most of his policies are fairly sound. I mean, he's got a big mouth, but that's because he's been boss his whole life. So he's used to having a big mouth. I can understand that. I've worked for some very successful businessmen who were total jerks, and that's Donald Trump. However, his policies work, the business works. And they hate that because that's the power of the individual, which is why they're trying to bring him down, which is why the left wing is breaking left. Not because the electorate is breaking left. The electorate is not breaking left. There are many polls that show that the younger people, not the people in university right now, but younger people are sick of social justice. Why? They want to be individuals. But the leaders are saying, wow, we can't fight the individual, so we will gang up on him. And that's where due process gets thrown out of the window. And that's where free speech gets out, because you cannot hear the individual. If you hear the individual, well, that's the end of social justice. And that's also why they associate strongly with Islam, because Islam is social justice. Islam is a strong belief in justice, to the point where they say, I believe that you are so evil, I will kill myself to take you out of the world. It's a kind of sick concept. You need balance when it comes to justice. And Islam is an exaggeration, a caricature of justice. A guy steals, chop off his hand. There's no chance for repentance there. There's no opening for mitigating circumstances. There's no opening for anything. It has to be justice. And also, if you're born a certain way, well, you will be a slave. Islam still believes very strongly in slavery. I thought it was horrifying that Obama was elected by people whose ancestors were probably sold into slavery by Obama's ancestors. Obama was the son of an African Muslim, and African Muslims sold their captives to slave traders. Slave traders didn't go running through the jungle. So there was a big travesty there. So this tension between group and individual, I don't know what's going to happen in America. I love America. I love America, and I'm finding more and more that on so many levels, America and Israel have a deep spiritual bond that I'm still trying to understand. I think it was in its inception. With the Christians who came to America were Hebraicists. They were looking for the Hebraic roots of Christianity, and they established America. And the concept of group versus individual, and that tension is inherent in the Bible. And socialism could not coexist with religion because it believes in the group, which is religion is the opiate of the masses, as they say, which is why socialism is inherently anti-religious, because the Bible is not entirely group. The Bible is a balance of group versus individual. On one hand, we received the Torah, 600,000 people at Mount Sinai. On the other hand, we have a king who embodies the nation. Not the ideal, but there is also one. And there's also individual service. There's individual service and group service. And one does not usurp the other. There's identity, but there's also a group identity. There's an individual identity. It was forbidden to count a nation because individuals are individuals, and you cannot put the nation over the individual. King David was punished for that. There's one nation, which is a collection of individuals. And yet each one of us gives the half shekel, so we are all represented individually. So here you have Donald Trump being slammed, not for what he's done, but for who he is. Because people hate that he's an individualist. You have Elizabeth Warren drinking beer, claiming she's an Indian. And She's not of the common people. If she stood up proudly and said, this is who I am, and I would like to represent the people, that is democracy. But she's trying to blend into the masses. And justice should be equal. Joe Biden stood up and said, I did a quid pro quo with the Ukrainians. Not a problem. But Donald Trump, because of who he is being tried for the very same thing. And Biden, because of who he is being given the pass. He went up in the polls, even though now we're talking about him actually shooting money towards his son. Everyone's like, oh, but Biden himself didn't get the money. That's absurd. That's absurd. And by the way, I hate to say this, but Hunter Biden, of blessed memory, when a father works hard his whole life and gives to his son, what Joe Biden did was he used his son to make money from his politics. That goes against the laws of nature. Sorry, if you include your son in on your crimes, it's an awful thing. It's an awful thing. And I hate to bring this up because I cannot imagine the pain. It's unnatural for a father to bury his son. That goes against the laws of nature. In a fixed natural world, the son buries the father and pays tribute to him. But also in a fixed natural world, the father does not use his son for his own crimes. Having Joe Biden use his son Hunter to collect graft money, to collect blood money from Ukraine, that's a horrible thing. Horrible. Yeah. And then for him to get a pass on that, and for people to say, oh, you're misunderstanding it. That's not true. That's not what he did. That's precisely what he did. So there is a unified theory connecting all of these things, connecting what's happening in America, where the socialists, the group, is rising up against the powerful individual. And that's what Donald Trump got elected on. He was the new individual who said, we've got to get the group, the framework to serve the individuals again, as opposed to Hillary Clinton, who had been using the framework to serve her, the framework to serve only her. I'm praying that one day there will be an investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Their crimes are in the open for everyone to see. There's no question that the Clinton Foundation broke the law. There's no question that Joe Biden broke the law. There's no question that Hillary Clinton broke the law. But the rule is that if they are the individual bringing together the group, then they are exempt because it's social justice, and the social is always right. So therefore, since they represent a group that should be in the right, they are exempt. Donald Trump, who's an individual who has really done nothing wrong. There was no quid pro quo. Explicitly, there was no quid pro quo. So now they're investigating him. They're running a process behind closed doors and get all excited. Oh, no. They want to bring it out into the open and open the doors. That's evil. Come on. Netanyahu, he is a bit of an individual. What I think we need in Israel, I'm not saying this is true for America, but I think what we need in Israel is we need a king. Because the founders of Israel knew that there needed to be some central persona to pull it all together. And that was implicit or explicit in the Torah. God said, you're going to need a king. I mean, ideally, we should all be listening to the voice of God and should all be unified. But the Bible understood that we need a king. We need a central figure to bring together the group. And that's true. We have the concept of three crowns in Judaism. The crown of the king, which he brings together the nation. The crown of the Cohen, who brings together all of our service. And the crown of Torah, which brings us also together under God. And they cannot be combined. We saw that with the Hashmonaeans, the Hasmoneans, I believe you say in English, who they were priests and they became kings, and it was a disaster. You need a persona to bring the people together, and even the original socialist founders of Israel understood that, so they created the president who was supposed to be the individual, but then they basically emasculated him and turned him into a figurehead who 98% of the time really does nothing. And we're seeing that their system did not work. If you had inspected it before, what we're going through now with what looks like is probably going to be the third failure to form a government, it was inevitable. It was totally inevitable. It's amazing that we went this long without it. Perhaps the only reason we went this long without it was because we had crooked politicians. What we need is a central figure that represents the nation, and that would be a king. And before you go, oh, that's evil. Well, what's the difference between a king and a president? What's the difference between a king and a president? It's working fine in England. You don't have any despotic monarch. The problem is if you only have a despotic monarch. In the Bible, you had the king and you had the Sanhedrin. One was for ruling and one was for justice. It's very similar to the American system of the Senate, the Congress, and the president. So I think if we put aside our prejudices and our preconceived notions about what a king is and the evil that it could bring, I personally think that Israel really needs a king to balance, to give stability. And I can guarantee that if we had a king, we wouldn't be going to elections again, even though every time we have an election, I get a day off. So it's a good thing for me, but it's costly, it's troublesome, and it's anti-democratic because here we have the third election. And it's not that I dislike Netanyahu so much, but if the people have spoken, you should at least, their voice should at least be heard. And here that's not happening. So I am pro-monarch in Israel. I think that this socialism is totally, and the Arab nations have always sided with Russia because socialism and Islam are perfectly compatible, where the group can do anything they want with the individual. And that's why the democratic socialists in America are pro-Palestinian, pro-Islam, and anti-Trump. And that's my opinion.